models and give early warnings through data, such as credit information from the central bank, court-related lawsuits and cases, etc. In the process of digital transformation of a bank, faced with the problems of complex customer-based drainage and traffic differences, after the deployment of Decision Engine Credit version, differentiated risk control design has been implemented, and 638,835 incoming applications have been processed, achieving a credit amount of $4 billion and 86% pass rate with remarkable results. Tongdun Decision Engine System. AI empowers intelligent risk control upgrade.
Di zamannya serba digital ini, semua lini kehidupan dituntut untuk bertransformasi menjadi seamless dan praktis. Keamanan identitas diperlukan untuk mendukung mobilitas sehari-hari. Pembukaan akun rekening bank digital dari verifikasi sampai autentikasi merupakan salah satu contoh penggunaan identitas digital. Selain itu, tanda tangan digital digunakan untuk memenuhi kebutuhan keamanan digital dalam bidang investasi, terutama pada saat pembukaan akun di aplikasi investasi. Bahkan kemudahan dan jaminan keamanan dalam verifikasi dan autentikasi identitas pengemudi ojek online. Fitur autentikasi merupakan kebutuhan yang sangat mendasar demi mendukung kelancaran operasional sehari-hari. Vida hadir memberikan solusi identitas digital yang aman, cepat, dan mudah, kapan saja, di mana saja, untuk siapa saja.
Baik UMKM atau perusahaan besar, mengelola pembayaran merupakan hal yang sensitif dan kompleks. Untuk menerima dan mengirim pembayaran, Anda tentu ingin solusi aman, cepat, dan fleksibel. Mengintegrasikan berbagai mitra pembayaran secara manual pasti memakan waktu. Solusinya, Zendit, payment gateway yang mampu memudahkan transaksi online untuk semua jenis usaha Anda. Segera integrasikan dengan Zendit dan dapatkan berbagai fitur canggih. Zendit terintegrasi dengan beragam bank besar di Indonesia supaya Anda dapat menerima dan mengirimkan uang ke berbagai pihak dengan mudah. Seluruh layanan berjalan otomatis sehingga Anda dapat bertransaksi kapanpun dan dimanapun. Zendit juga menyediakan berbagai produk lainnya yang dapat membantu bisnis Anda. Tidak dikenakan biaya pengaturan dan perawatan, hanya bayar sesuai penggunaan. Zendit aman, mudah, memiliki proses integrasi cepat, dan didukung oleh tim customer sukses kelas dunia. Bergabunglah bersama ratusan bisnis lainnya dan gunakan Zendit sekarang.
Well, can I hear applause for us, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first breakout session of Indonesia's Fintech Summit 2022 in the topic of protection, and protection, strengthening cyber defense in Indonesia's digital economy and finance ecosystem. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Anak Agung Yumas, and this is an honor to me to become your master of ceremony in today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to me as well to inform you that among us here, we have our distinguished speakers, Mr. Muhammad Andi Aziz, welcome, as a senior cybersecurity specialist, National Cyber and Crypto Agency of Indonesia. And then Mr. Hana Abriansyah, who already here, as the head of Information Security, Goto Financial. We also have Mr. Vishal Verma. Hello, good afternoon. As a Senior Director, APAC LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And also Mr. Wong Lok Hyo. Good afternoon. As a Partner Cyber Advisory, KPMG from Singapore. We would like to greet our moderator today also. Welcome to Mr. Niki Luhur, as a member of AFTA Supervisory Board and founder and group CEO of VIDA. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we will commence the breakout session. As the moderator of the sessions, we welcome member of AFTA Supervisory Board to lead the discussion today. Therefore, to Mr. Nikhil Luhur, you may take the floor.
Good afternoon. I know this is a hard slot of right after lunch, but we promise to make it exciting for everyone here and to everyone online. Hope you'll get a few interesting insights today about the state of cybersecurity and what it means for you. So today, I'd like to first start off by welcoming my panelists up onto stage. So first and foremost, I'd like to invite Pak Muhammad Endi Aziz. Pak Muhammad Endi Aziz, or Pak Endi, is the coordinator for risk management and cybersecurity measurement. He currently leads the cyber incident response team development at BSSN, the Indonesian cyber and crypto agency. Next, I'd like to invite Pak Hana Abriansyah, head of information security at Gotoh Financial. Pak Hana has been instrumental in leading a lot of the initiatives at GoPay to Gotoh Financial, GoFin, as well as coming all the way from the payments background earlier at Midtrans. Next, I'd like to invite Vishal Varma, Senior Director of Asia Pacific at APAC for LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Mr. Varma comes with more than 16 years of experience at enterprise accounts, and prior to working at LexisNexis, was also involved in quite a few of the credit bureau solutions at Experian. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Wong Lok Yo, who is currently a partner of the cyber advisory practice at KPMG Singapore, and has been involved throughout his career throughout financial services at quite a few of the largest financial institutions in the world, including Deutsche Bank. So here we are today, and cyber is always an interesting topic because there is always this feeling of uneasiness. There's always a feeling of how much should we say, how much should we disclose, what's the appropriate, what is really happening. I think there's ever since the pandemic hit, it's clear that cyber incidents around the world have been on the rise. There have been a rise of attacks. There have been a rise in wanting to become an attacker and wanting to become a hacker, to the point where Google search engine history searches show an 80% spike in the amount of searches related to towards hacking. So today, I think the landscape has changed quite a lot significantly. But before we talk about the future, I thought since we have such an incredible amount of today, I wanted to start first with, let's get the juicy details of what exactly has happened, what are some of the problems, and at the end of the day, I think being able to share perhaps a few war stories, and perhaps is there, someone on the panel will be able to help share an anecdote of some of the challenges that they faced. Look, yep.
Can you hear me? Yes. So, what was your question? What is?
I think we all have heard about these issues of cyber threats and security issues, and now there's more and more concern around personal data protection. There's more and more, we hear more and more about account takeovers, about breaches, but sometimes these can seem very distant in terms of, oh, that might have happened to someone else, and I don't think that's going to impact me. I don't know what this means for me as a person, and perhaps rather than talking about frameworks of IT security, it would be helpful to just hear some war stories, in fact, of what are some incidents and some issues that you faced, and some practical challenges that have emerged, specifically in the past 5 years of your experience.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that. Well, but before I start, maybe I want to do a quick poll with the audience. Can I have a show of hands? How many people are between business and tech, how many people are more in the business side of the house? Okay. And tech, I'm assuming, with the rest of the people. So it's like, 60-40 kind of split. How many people are responsible for cybersecurity? Nobody? Okay, actually that was a trick question. Everybody is responsible for cybersecurity. Okay, so yeah, look, as Pak Nicky had alluded, I've been in cybersecurity for a little bit of time. I started at a point in time in the past before the word cyber was popular. So I was in IT security, and back then when I was working for a bank, for example, I was treated like an outcast because I'm the guy who was deemed to be the showstopper, right? Go into the floor where you've got all the developers and everybody looked away because don't talk to him because he's gonna review your codes and then he's gonna tell you you can't put this to production. Fast forward to where we are today, I think cyber has finally gotten its due recognition and at the right place too. The boards are talking about it. But of course, unfortunately, sometimes the board need a bit more education. Yeah. They've heard of this thing about cyber, they tell the leadership team, go do something about it, but we need more people with cybersecurity awareness, knowledge, skills to sit in the board and be part of that conversation. And I'm seeing a slight change moving in that direction, which is great. In fact, in Singapore, the cybersecurity agency has mandated that as a critical infrastructure organization, you would need to have somebody with a certain number of years of experience in cybersecurity to sit in the board. If you don't, then you don't pass that part of the regulation, which is awesome.
So talking about experience though, what are these sort of hard-earned experiences? I mean, we can all go through an ISO 27001 accreditation on information security best practices. We can look at information privacy policies, but in the field, what are the experiences that you found have been priceless learnings, lessons learned, if not, the school of hard knocks? What have been the things that have actually brought that to life, that this is really important, not just on paper and not just for the purposes of an accreditation, which is important to gather trust and to set a baseline of that we're all on the same level. But what is it really that, whether it's an opportunity or a threat or a combination of both, what have you seen in terms of that experience?
Okay, you got me at School of Hard Knocks, right? I think having looked how many people have actually experienced a cyber breach before? Maybe, shall we put this to the floor?
Anyone brave to show how many of you have had someone try to phish your password? Anybody got an email from someone else that says, "Hey, I'm your boss. Please transfer money," or somebody else you see?
We've got one person.
Anyone?
2, 3.
I can tell you somebody tried to impersonate me.
Oh.
And they tried to actually say to transfer money to them and sent that email directly to my head of finance. And in fact, their email was exactly the same as mine, including the domain. So who else? So now that I've taken the leap of faith, right, in the room, how And this is one of the biggest challenges in cybersecurity.
Yeah, so just one final point before I hand it over to the rest of the panelists. I want to add to what Nikki had said. I feel it should be 100% of people putting up your hands. So there are two possibilities of why you didn't put up your hands. Well, in fact, there's only one possibility. It's because you didn't know that you've been attacked, right? Okay. So if there is time afterwards, I also want to talk, because I think I didn't answer your question. What is the trend? What is trending now? Cyber breaches, especially in the form of ransomware. But maybe you want to add on?
Yeah. Maybe I'll switch it up and I'll pass it to Pak Hana. What have been some of these school of hard knocks? Coming from the payments side of things or coming towards the Goto Financial, what are some of the challenges and the threats you've seen out there?
Okay. The first hard challenges for me to implement cybersecurity, or the one that I face in my industry, is actually how to convince the board to get them on board to implement this. Like, I believe a lot of companies are required by regulator to follow the ISO, PCI DSS and whatnot, right? But if they are not required, will the top management even consider to follow that framework?
So board alignment and getting the board buy-in is one of the biggest challenges.
Yes.
What about in terms of risks that you see? I mean, maybe some of the part is what's the pain, right? What's the payoff? If you're trying to pitch this as a solution, then what's the pain today?
Yeah. Actually, that is one of the strategy we need to do to get the support from the management. Like, for example, I think the biggest issue and the hardest challenge we are facing right now is to verify the digital identity of our users. Because, I mean, it might sound easy, but whenever someone's tried to log in to their Gojek or GoBiz account, how can we sure that the one who is logging in is actually the person who owns the account and not someone else, like the impersonator or whatnot? Now, the risk can come not only from our infrastructure, because the risk can also come from the level of awareness of the user itself. It's easier for the hacker to gain access to our user's account via social engineering instead of breaching into our system. Now, usually a lot of professionals will say that, oh, then you have no other way than to increase the awareness level of our users. Yeah, I agree, that is the easiest one, but I believe we need to have something which is better, like security control, like, yeah, I mean, specifically to make sure that how to verify those digital identity on the user side.
So telling everyone that they need to get smarter and they need all the consumers to just be smarter about it really doesn't cut it, right?
Yeah, no.
So that's the whole point, is we need to find better solutions. We need to find better technologies that is not just trying to find the easy way out, that, oh, the user's at fault.
Yeah.
Right? Vishal, any thoughts here about what have been your school of hard knocks?
Yeah, sure. By the way, I did raise my hand on the trick question. So
You passed.
Am I audible? Yes. Okay. I think the key to your point about the war stories and people are seeing it as a real thing. Like during the COVID, I mean, this one of the things happened with my mom, and I think all of us were trying to be nice to people around us who are not so privileged. So she was a victim of fake websites for donation. And then of course she ended up donating a small amount, but she ended up giving her personal details. And I was like, Mom, your son works in cyber defense, you should ask me. But the point is, people find you at a vulnerable point and then kind of push you through a so genuine message, like you mentioned, your email. I think people who don't really have that level of awareness are getting aware of this now, thanks to these kind of stories. What we have seen, I think, is probably the best weapon in this kind of scenarios is collaboration. And I think the theme of the event is moving forward together. I think cyber defense, whether we call it digital fraud, digital identity, proofing, these are the kind of problem statement which no one entity can actually solve on its own. You've got to come together, look at how do you ring fence yourself. I mean, there are not million and million hackers, who are trying to defraud you. There are actually set number of people or set number of organizations. If you create an infrastructure where you try and minimize those attacks and ring fence yourself, I think that's the way we have seen success in different parts of the world. And I think there is a larger acceptance at a regulation level as well. then let's create something which is in a way centralized but gives you that comfort. I mean, there's been talk of creating an IP repository in India by the regulator. So it's not official yet, but I think there are views coming forward where everybody's saying, okay, let's create a basic minimum network where I can actually know, okay, whether I can trust that entity or no. I think that's what is coming up.
So collaboration is key, and being able to deal with this information asymmetry, right? I mean, half the people in this room either don't want to admit that they were hacked or they didn't know they were hacked. And part of the problem in this is how do we actually build this better awareness? And awareness is one thing on the end user side because that's one way out, but at the same time, coordinating amongst industry players is going to be really critical to finding a real solution. So perhaps I'll pass this next to you, Pak Andy. You know, from the, what do you believe as you're seeing from a national level at Indonesia's cybersecurity agency? What are the most significant cybersecurity threats towards Indonesia's overall digital economy, and specifically, since we're here at a FinTech summit, you know, towards the FinTech industry? What are you seeing, Pak?
First of all, my English is not very good, so I'm very sorry, but I have some explanation on this. So regarding this threats, both originating from abroad or from within our organization, from our country. Of course, we need to be aware of both from originating from abroad or within our country. But if we look at the cyber exposure in Indonesia in recent years, the cyber risk exposure we face today is really enormous in terms of the volume, the number of cyber attacks and internet traffic anomalies in Indonesia, which BSSI monitored during which reached more than 1.6 billion in just one year.
More than 1.6 million threats.
Billion,
1.6 billion threats.
And it
billion attacks.
Yes, it increased more than 3 times compared to the previous year in 2020.
3 times?
3 times in just 1 year.
In a single year.
Yes. Yeah. And based on our cybersecurity monitoring annual report 2021, there was almost 5,000 websites in Indonesia that were defaced, changed the website, the visual or the content, and in just 1 year. And we also received 2,800 reports related to cyber incident and also the vulnerabilities in just 1 year, 2,800 reports. So from the various report, we know that the financial sector is at the highest exposure compared to other sectors, and to examine the cyber threats in particular industry. Of course, we need to look at how the ecosystem, how the business operates, and the fintech industry in Indonesia. In this case, there are several classifications. There are ranging from peer-to-peer lending and market aggregators and payments, and of course, each has different specific threats. So we need to be aware of what we are standing on. And at least we have identified 5 biggest issues in this term of fintech industry. The first is public literacy, and the second is illegal fintech services. The third is ethical issues, and the fourth is misuse of personal data, and the last is data leakage and personal data protection failure. Well, the last 2 issues are closely related to cyber risk. And regarding to these issues, we always, at BSSM always remind that to the industry to adopt and implement security measures, cybersecurity frameworks, and in this case, OJK has mandated the industry to implement ISO 27001 at least for the minimum standard at full scope. And special to the fintech lending, OJK mandated that the ISO 27001 standard must be implemented at full scope or organization.
That sounds like very good progress in being able to set some clear minimum bars. We have initiatives on driving public literacy campaigns, as well as being able to raise the minimum bar at a regulatory level to enforce that not only at a systems point of view, but an organization-wide point of view, that fintech companies are going to be required to have ISO 27001 accreditations, which for the audience is a information security management accreditation. And that's definitely very powerful. I think these are fantastic measures that that BSSN is helping advise other ministries. But perhaps back to the topic of collaboration. I mean, it sounds like BSSN is having monitoring a huge uptick of attacks. 1.6 billion attacks, 3 years, 3 times the amount of attacks year on year. Back to the topic of collaboration. Look, you advise quite a few different companies, financial institutions, such as banks, as well as fintechs and other large enterprises. What do you see, from your sort of helicopter view, if you were to be able to provide the ideal consulting model of collaboration, what are some of the initiatives that you think would be practical that we could execute as an industry?
Yeah, I think, well, there's heaps of things that we can and need to do because to the point about collaboration, the bad actors are collaborating very, very well and very effectively in the dark web. So, and that's why they're, in this case, they're more successful than us in a lot of sense. So to the point that, Hannah and Charlotte shared earlier, right? Creating that ecosystem, perhaps one of the first port of call would be information sharing, right? And there have been information sharing and analysis standards, ISACs, springing up over the last several decades. And I suppose we want to put a booster to this from a government support perspective. That would be very good, right? So in terms of how organizations that are facing or have faced a certain breach, for example, and how they've overcome it, if they can find a way to share it with the others, so that whoever is faced with a similar challenge, because look, the threat actors, their tools, tactics, and procedures don't change that much, right? So if you know how people have been able to solve it, it's just like how we've cured, well, not cured, but helped to stave the issues of COVID, when people start sharing, the genome and things about how this virus works, we are all much better protected. I think that's probably the first port of call.
So information sharing and being able to share common attack methods, common attack vectors. What have you seen, Vishal, from your side? What would you, what are your thoughts on how to best collaborate as an industry? What can we do better together?
Sure. I think an interesting thing you mentioned, because sometimes we don't look at the industry we are actually fighting against is also a very organized one. I mean, they also have the yearly targets and monthly targets. They are pretty organized crime that way to attack the legitimate industry. I think Park mentioned an interesting point around the misuse of the compromised data. I think that's where collaboration becomes very industry agnostic. So to your point, Nikki, one of the things, let's say we do in the market is we run networks where we not only work with the banks, but we also work with some of the media companies, some of the travel portals, some of the big retailers. So every time you make an inquiry through your digital channel, and you could be changing between your applications, between your device, we should still be able to verify and say, okay, that's actually Nikki or that's Vishal, because I see you on the network. So it has to go beyond a specific industry, because the fraudsters is not like the banking or the fintech, right? They're going everywhere where they can make money. So I think that's one way we've been seeing very successful results. We've done this in UK, in Japan, in India, we're picking up something in Singapore. I think it has to go beyond one industry. You got to have a start point somewhere to John's point. I think you got to look at what is the lowest hanging fruit for us. If it's a couple of big fintech players trying to come together and share some level of information, fraud is an area of no compete. There's nobody competing on the fraud. There has to be more collaboration. The logical step is you need to move beyond one industry. That's where I think the whole industry is moving.
Thank you, Vishal. And that's a great segue to thinking that fraud is not about a single industry and that we're competing against highly organized organizations, right? They have targets. They collaborate on the dark web. They share best practices of how to attack, how to breach. And yet, as an industry, even with fintech, that's probably not enough. That we need to cross-collaborate again with other parts of the ecosystem, including whether it's travel or e-commerce. Now, that's probably a great segue to Pahana. As we talk about ecosystems and we talk about cross industries, obviously Goto covers everything from ride hailing to travel to from transportation to courier, logistics, food, payments, financials. Have you seen a way to learn from certain attacks? I mean, is it more common or?
Yeah, I think in terms of the attack pattern, different in the method will be different, but the pattern is similar. So I don't believe that the organized the hackers is targeting only a specific institution like or industry, but they're actually attacking everyone. So it's not that, there's a hacker who's specializing in attacking a fintech company only. No, I think that's the thing. And I also agree with Pak Wong. Information sharing is very important, even within our own group. So as you mentioned, we have a lot of industry like food, fintech and whatnot, right? We need to share information between us to share the lesson learned. We detect attack every day. From that, we can share it to the other group and make sure that we have a new attack pattern detected. I want you to check on your side whether you are already have some control to mitigate that. If we can openly share that information to the other company or in the similar industry, it will be very helpful. But I mean, it's not as easy as it sounds, but actually that's probably why we are losing against the hacker. The hacker is working together, but we as an industry player, we and the other company is actually competing each other. We are not working together. That's why we are always on the losing side on the cybersecurity battle.
So it continuously sounds.
Point here. I think one of the myths which now completely demolished is that cyber attacks can only happen to the big entities and to the government. I think that myth is completely demolished with COVID, and at Pat's point, it can happen irrespective of your size. It can happen to you. I think that has really at least initiated some sort of collaboration direction going forward in the industry. So that's an important point.
Just want to add to Michelle's point, right? I think one of the reasons why the crosshair is shifted from the big companies to the smaller companies. One of them, for obvious reasons, because the smaller companies have less robust and mature security controls, and fintech organizations are in that category, right? Compared to your bigger brothers and sisters, the MNC banks and insurance companies, fintech companies are startups and less resourced, I would say, right? And on top of that, there's this issue about supply chain attacks, right? Because once you get into a smaller organization, you become the conduit to the bigger organization, and there have been historically so many cases of big organizations falling to attacks, not because they didn't have the security controls, but unfortunately, their supply chain who have access to them have been breached.
Yeah, maybe I'd like to add something. That's also true, but so the hacker is not always targeting the big companies, but they will target the easiest one because for them it's a business. They need to spend some resources, manpower, and time. So if they are actually targeting a difficult target, it's a bad ROI for them. So usually, this is based on my experience, fintech is actually have a lower attack compared to non-fintech, because the hacker thinks fintech will have stronger security control compared to non-fintech company.
Well, those are very interesting insights, and it sounds like no one is out of sight or out of scope from a hacker perspective. This is not just an enterprise problem. This is actually relevant, in fact, even more so for some of the small and medium businesses because it's easier for hackers. So it comes down to an ROI, and if the effort is low, well, why not attack that too? So perhaps back to Pak Andy. I'd like to better understand, Pat, what are your suggestions to help, of course, the fintech industry players, but I guess now even broader, right, across a lot of the digital economy players, how can they reinforce the cyber defense, right? And what type of support collaboration does BSSN need the most, from this industry? We talk about collaboration, talk about information sharing as an example, but perhaps what, from your perspective, could help BSSN at a national level perhaps be even more effective and helping the industry players to at least deal or manage with some of these cyber threats and data breaches?
I believe that we all agree that some of the fintech industries will apply the cybersecurity measures and also standards also. So in this case, the company management must have a view on the importance of GRC and also the cybersecurity within their organizations. And based on the current regulation, this fintech industry, especially in the fintech lending, is also required to implement the ISO 27001 standard, and it's the minimum requirement for the industry. And we also propose several initiatives for the industry as well, at least to strengthen our collaboration between the industry and also the government. The first one is the industry association can collaborate with the SSN to create some kind of workshop curriculum related to cybersecurity and also the cyber risk. So it can be adopted to regular crash program, maybe, and regular training for the company and also the personnel in managing handling this risk. And actually, it's already running now with the AFI. Once in 3 months, we do the crash program and we train the risk. And the second practice that we want to encourage is the information sharing and also the coordination between the cybersecurity team within the companies in the fintech industry and also our national CISO or our national cybersecurity incident response team within the SSN. We strongly encourage the industry to register the CISO team or the security team to the SSN so that if there are critical events or incidents which are needed to be immediately handled, the CISO team from each organization can handle and coordinate with the SSN. And because in terms of cybersecurity incident, it must be handled within minutes or hours. So we cannot rely on conventional coordination, which is based on bureaucracy. So, and if needed, the national CISO in the SSN can also provide assistance to handle the incidents. And the last practice that we want to encourage is that we collaboratively engage to do the cybersecurity exercise or cyber incident simulation. So the SSN routinely organizes such kind of event. Even last October, we did it with banking sector. So I hope that we can continue to foster our collaboration and in order to maximize the role of the industry and also to develop trust and also the confidence for the ecosystem.
Well, that sounds fantastic, Andy. So it's not only from a policy point of view and starting from the GRC, but also establishing that clear methods to get accredited and for people to know what standards really are and how they're all the way to being implemented, but as well as collaborating with the industry of reviewing cyber threats, and ideally, I guess, moving forward, sharing more information and being able to coordinate all the way to an incident response level, being able to mobilize teams at an incident response level. I mean, that sounds fantastic, right? What do you think are going to be, and this is maybe I'll open it up to anyone on the panel. I've heard, when we talk about fraud, and yes, there's no competition here on fraud, yet people somehow don't want to share the information about fraud. And information asymmetry continues to be one of the biggest weaknesses of the industry versus, of course, the attackers, the fraudsters. What do you believe are some of the biggest challenges of why that is, and why can't industry players just collaborate and share this information more easily? And or do you have any recommendations, concrete steps that whether the FinTech Association or the SSN or the cyber agency or even the FinTech regulators, who hopefully a few are watching this stream, a few words of advice of how we can actually make this a reality? How do we actually take a few concrete steps to make this collaboration come to life?
Perhaps I'll start and then fellow panelists can add on to this. Well, I'd like to say, from KPMG perspective, we started, well, it didn't quite start, we actually acquired a non-profit setup called I4 Forums. Okay, so this is a organization that was running on its own, and then KPMG felt very strongly about this cause, and then we kind of decided to acquire it and kept it going. So the I4 Forum is actually a global forum of cybersecurity leaders. And we get together very regularly, and I'm talking about literally every other week, to have insight sharing. And we, in those sessions, Chatham House rules again, everything that's discussed stays in there. And organizations such as banks and government agencies and minus regulators, because we don't like regulators to come and breathe down everybody's neck when people are sharing very intimate details of them getting breached. And you know, from various industries, like what Vijay said, right, across industries, talking about the most recent attack that they've encountered and how they overcame the challenges and how they dealt with it. So I think if we can take something like that and drive it at a national level, I think that'd be very good. In fact, in Singapore, I'd been talking to the cybersecurity agency, and you know, we were also discussing about the possibility of doing something like that, right? Maybe just starting with something very basic. Okay, just on the topic of ransomware. If somebody's been faced with ransomware, share it. And of course, if people are shy about sharing such information, if it is not because of competitive reasons, it's probably because they're afraid somebody else would kind of divulge it. Or find a way to anonymize it, and still make it available.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think there's definitely a lot of work is happening as part of Financial, which is a great first step. To your point, when it comes down to actual data sharing, I mean, we look at broadly two huge challenges. One is, do we have data in a standard format across? The way you collecting data is very different from, let's say, Google collects. The feeds are different. Are you collecting from day one or once you have the prospect becoming a customer? So I think that vintage of data and the way you collect is very important, because you want to create a common repository, just to have a common language, common data model. Right? Those are the practical challenges. And second, as you said, you know, there's always a trust element when you share the data with your competition. Even if you might agree in principally the fraud is scenario not complete, but we normally tend to have a neutral party managing the data within the regulations of sort of ensuring the data is not used for any other purpose. I think data model and who's going to be the custodian of the data, so to say, whether it's locally somebody, one of the partners, or in some countries regulated with their job. So I think these are the two big problem areas we see. Wherever you kind of start the journey to create something at industry level, you got to answer these two points first. Then I think everything else follows.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge would be, the first will be the regulation. How do we regulate it? Because we need to regulate it properly so that this information sharing is not actually introducing another risk. We want to solve problem, not create a new problem, right? The second one is we need to properly control it, because how can we sure that is it comply with the new personal data protection law? Can I share this data? If we want to share this data to another player in the industry, will I violate any law or regulation around it? And control is definitely, as Shal mentioned, we need to have a designated custodian and a trusted custodian who can make sure that the data that we are sharing is actually secure.
The managing personal data seems to be, I mean, talking about regulations and forums and being able to have a common language, a common framework to be able to collaborate and having it regulated to be able to be enforced. And you touch Hana specifically on the Personal Data Protection Act that was recently came into law in Indonesia as Undang-Undang Perlindungan Data Pribadi. What are your thoughts on how, I mean, we heard some concerns earlier about, will the board take this seriously? Will we get buy-in? Will this be prioritized? Are there going to be perhaps, and is this going to be in-house or is this going to be specialized third parties that are going to manage this? And how do we manage this at an industry level, at a collaborative level? Perhaps some thoughts to the panel as well on what do you see is with this new set of regulations coming in around personal data protection, how do you think that's going to impact the way the industry behaves, especially with regard to cybersecurity?
Okay, yeah, let me take. I think it's a great step forward, and I believe with the new PDP law, it will actually, we can get more support and attention from the top level management. Because if we are failed to comply with the regulation, we can get fined 2% out of 1 year revenue, right? And from my experience,
2% of a year's revenue.
Yeah,
that's the fine.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong, Pak Andy.
2%.
2%.
Not profit, revenue.
Revenue, and nothing get the attention of the top level management except for revenue.
Money talks, yeah.
Yeah.
I was listening to the morning session on the new Data Protection Act with a couple of lawyers and I think advisor to the government. I think the word trust was used, if I'm not wrong, more than 175 times. Because that's what I'm confident. I think that tells you that how, even if you put out a regulation, how important it is for organizations to go out, maybe an extra layer, bring that awareness to their consumers. But even if you're adding more layers, that's for your benefit because we want them to trust. If I'm making a payment via mobile wallet or mobile banking app, am I really concerned about losing my data? That's where organizations are getting into through regulations to kind of create that awareness. So it's yes, you need regulations in place, but also organizations need to kind of do that in parallel, creating awareness and having more trust in the customer so that yes, everything is sort of taken care of. So I think that's the big lead in what the way we see this kind of concept of this.
Okay, Pak Andy, any thoughts about the personal data protection laws? It's a big topic. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think unfortunately what Hans says is very right. If we don't push and make a sanction for the incident, nobody do the cybersecurity. So I think based on our culture, we need to be pushed very hard and also to the sanctions. So if people get attention to customer protection in this case.
So just to add on to what my fellow panelists have said, right, I 100% agree with what Pak Hana had said. When you speak the language of the board, right, revenues and all that, you get everyone saying that. Again, I see this trend coming, right? Senior leaders will go to jail if they have any security lapse, and then there's a compromise of personal identified information, and now. At the same time, I get a lot of customers complaining to me that regulators are being unfair, giving them a hard time. I think, and I usually would respond to them in this way, right, that look, I think we may be reading the situation incorrectly. Right? Regulators are doing what they're doing so that it can move things out of inertia. Regulators don't regulate for the sake of it. Right? And now, for organizations who have to comply, they sometimes need to also have that ability to comply to the spirit of the regulation rather than to the letter, right? Otherwise, there's no end to it, and it will indeed be very, very challenging for everybody. So, if you look at the situations over in, let's say, the European region, where regulations such as these are a lot more mature, and sometimes you may see that the regulators may over-regulate, right? But ultimately, the end game, the intent behind it is really to protect the individuals who otherwise would not have any means to protect themselves, against big corporations who are using their data.
Oftentimes, it does take a regulator to step in, and that is very largely, especially in financial services, usually the mandate is from a consumer protection mandate, that regulators need to step in to make sure that businesses are acting in the best interest of their consumers and protecting their consumers' interests, protecting their data, and ultimately protecting this concept of trust. So I think, as Vishal mentioned, we heard trust about 70 times this morning. So what is it, if it sounds like such a simple word, right? Trust. I think this is something that we all have as our common vocabulary here, but what is your take of what is the challenge here? If trust is such an issue and we seem to understand what it means, it seems like something is getting lost in translation here. Something is not really carrying through about what it means to be able to trust. And we talk about this stick approach of 2% of revenues. Okay, you've woken up the board. Now the board is taking you seriously. Right? What is the carrot? Instead of just the stick, what's the carrot to be able to build this more trust in an ecosystem? What would that look like differently if we were be able to implement, whether we want any cybersecurity practitioners out there implement a zero trust world, or we want to talk about some of these innovative concepts, but I think bringing it back down to the customer, the consumer, right? Not only in terms of protection, what could it do to transform that experience? When we talk about revenues, what could we do to make it relevant to a board that this is not just about avoiding a 2% revenue penalty? What else could it impact if we were to take some of these initiatives more seriously?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this first, right? Yeah, I think this old adage of trust is something that is hard to gain, easy to lose. You can spend the last 20 years building up your reputation and trust with your clients, but if you get a breach, you lose their data, immediately everything goes down the drain. So yes, the trust imperative is a very strong one. I think to your point about what can we do with trust, I would say, well, I look to the Singapore government. I think this is something that they've done quite right, where they're now promoting the adoption of Trustmark. Now, not the most advanced or robust mature implementation just yet, but they've developed frameworks for organizations to be able to get that logo that they can put onto their website to say, oh, look, I have gone through the whole gamut of getting myself up to this level of security hygiene, and therefore I earned this Trustmark. Right? In an economy where there's so much noise, this can be the difference that makes the difference for a corporation.
Yeah, I think this is so correct, right? I mean, if you look at ourselves as consumers, right, we all want to work with companies which are ethical, right? And if I have an extra or independent third-party company saying, okay, this company is into automotive manufacturing and their methods are good, trust, I would put my faith in there. So I think there is a larger buy-in happening, even if there are revenue pressures and the penalties and all that. That's the right thing to do for the end consumers and eventually for the business. You will be out of business if you are not trusted by your end customers. And you're right, it can't begin overnight. It sometimes can take a generation. We've seen the biggest brand moving out of business right over 2 years, thanks to not adopting to right innovation or the trust from consumer science. I think it's going to be more and more aggressive as we go along, and there is no exception there.
Yeah, I mean, talking from experience, I work in a digital and technology company. Trust is actually have direct impact to revenue. How so? If the level of trust of our user or merchant or customer is low, it will reduce the acquisition and retention, and that will impact the revenue. That's why I think the board has no excuse to not prioritize trust. to increase level of trust of our services.
Yeah, I think this is the momentum for the industry to want to collaborate more, especially to increase the trust for the ecosystem. So, with DSSN, we are not actually not just the regulators, but also we are the technical authorities which develop, and also we go together with industry to create and foster the cybersecurity ecosystem. So I think this is the momentum for the government and also the industry to be together more, where we trust and also develop trust.
Andy, what do you think about this initiative that Nokia was sharing, the Singapore government having a mark, of a certain trust level, right? Same way that if we go to a hotel, it's a 4-star hotel, it's a 5-star hotel. We know what that means, roughly. Of course, between 5-star, there's a different quality, right? Or you go and fly an airline, and there's a safety rating by Skytrax. Oh, this is 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. Is there some sort of thought, do you think this is something possible, that we could try and collaborate as an industry to sort of help consumers have a simpler view of understanding, should I trust this business?
I think the trust policy actually already in the discussion with Kominfo, and Delonic. So we engage in the discussion, and I think after this we need to push the design or the draft of the regulation, so that the consumer and also we as the user of the financing services will trust more the ecosystem.
And what do you think about, what other initiatives can we do? And we're going to wrap up the panel in the next 5 minutes. So perhaps this is where I'll sort of say on closing final thoughts, right? We've talked about, the importance of having public literacy, but probably being able to do this in a bit more of an innovative way. Instead of, hey, take a cybersecurity course, it's probably, hey, here's a few trust marks that you can identify to see the difference in what one business is doing, not just a stake if they fail, but for the businesses who are actually investing a lot. As Hannah was saying, some of the fintech businesses, maybe they are investing a lot of money, and to be able to build that stronger relationship to help ultimately build that trust, which will lead to more acquisitions, which will lead to more retention and lead to more revenue. How do we continue to develop this sort of positive flywheel of reinforcing, not only penalizing the bad, but reinforcing the good?
Yeah, quick one, right? When you talk about building any ecosystem in a very healthy way, I think every stakeholder has a role to play. So there is a role for regulation, there's a role for the stakeholders, and there's a role for the consumer. I think all the parties need to play their role and the point, and then I think we will move towards creating that. And that collaboration has to happen from within first, and then if you move outside the industry, I think that will be the start for anybody to do.
Maybe any closing thoughts from the panel? Anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think what is in the concern of the SSF, so on the regulators in the financial industry, such as OJK and BAE, that we must ensure a balance between the intentions and this technology development, and also especially the work on the Fintech in terms of cybersecurity. And we also encourage efforts in terms of cybersecurity from the DSSN side, and we also wait for the industry to go together in collaboration, and we open our mind and also our hand to
I'll go next. Just to wrap up, I want to go back to the first thing that we discussed right from the start of this dialogue. Right? And I think we asked the question to the audience, who is responsible for security? Unfortunately, nobody asked that. That's maybe except Michelle. So really, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to security, we don't just look to the government to put everybody is responsible from a national point of view. So at the grassroots level, at the individual organizational level, something I want to pick up on why Vishal mentioned earlier, I would highly advocate that we build in this concept of cyber resilience. Right? Cyber resilience is about assuming that we will be breached. And we asked the question, how many people have been attacked? And again, not everybody put up their hands. If you look at the statistics, right, there will be anywhere between 80 and 90% of organizations being hacked. And my commentary to that is, if it's 90%, it's because the other 10%, again, didn't know that they were hacked. Everybody ultimately will get attacked in one way or another. So assume that you've been breached. Then what can you do to very quickly recover from it? So look at what is ground zero, what is worst case scenario, when you get breached, and then shift to the left, right? What can you do to mitigate it, prevent it, and so forth? I think that's probably something we want to take into consideration.
Yeah, I think you summed up pretty well. We have to look at where do we start. Where do we start point, and we can achieve all the big things over some time, but I think if we wait for that big thing to happen, we won't kick off anywhere. And one thing is, it's given that these attacks are not going anywhere. I mean, we are dealing with highly motivated people, not just the system, so they're not going anywhere. But we're going to make some start somewhere in terms of both collaboration and creating the trust within the industry as well as the consumer. I think that would be a good start.
Yeah, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of the collaboration on improving the cybersecurity, especially if we want to improve the maturity level of cybersecurity in Indonesia, not only in the industry. We need to work together. Like the industry players need to be open and collaborate, like with the entity like OJK, BI, BSSN, and Kominfo. That way, I think in security, we always only as strong as the weakest link. And if we want to be strong as a nation in cybersecurity term, everyone needs to be strong, not only us or not only on specific industry only.
Great, thank you very much. We can have a round of applause for this fantastic panel.
Okay, so once again, can you give a round of applause for our moderators and our speakers? Thank you so much. So please to stay here. We have take a photo sessions together first to commemorate this special event. Yeah. Well, there was really insightful discussions, right, regarding how to protect as well as strengthen our digital economy as well as our finance ecosystem. Once again, thank you so much to our moderator and our speakers. Okay, give a big smile. One more, please. Yes, smile. Can you select Bali? 3, 2, 1. Bali. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Nikhil Luhar, our speakers, Mr. Aziz, Mr. Abrian Shah, Mr. Verma, and Mr. Wong Lucky of a very insightful discussion. Well, you may continue to your next agenda. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today's breakout sessions. Thank you so much for your participations, and see you tomorrow for the second day of Indonesia Fintech Summit 2022.